Okay, let's talk about how to animate your 3D photo in After Effects. It's going to be really easy. I think you're really going to like this. The first thing I want to do though is show you a couple of examples and kind of give you an idea of the way things work. Okay, we have a short animation here. We call postcards in space. This is what the type of animation is described as in After Effects. Some people call this 2.5D because it's really not full 3D. The reason it's not full 3D is because these objects have no depth, they have no extrusion. So they're like postcards. And the way we do this is we set these postcards up in depth. We've thrown this image into the background there. We've pushed it off in depth towards the background. That's the third dimension. And here we have our subject, which is pulled forward towards the camera. Here's the camera back here. There you can see the camera. Now watch on this side. Don't watch over here for a minute. Watch on the left side, and you'll watch the camera push in. Okay. Now if you look over on the right side, you'll see what the result is. So it almost looks like a simple scale effect, but it's not. Neither of these objects is moving. The subject and the background are not moving. They're not animating. The only thing that's animating is the camera. The camera's pushing in. Okay. There you go. All right, so there are several examples of this in here, and I hope you take the time to open this project and look around a little bit. We talked last week about the student that created the ad for the wine here. Let me go ahead and take this into one view so all we see is the single view. And we've got the wine, we've got the background, and he's added a couple of more elements in here, a logo and a slogan. And let's see how it plays out. The wine tips and pours, the logo comes in. Let's play it again. And finally, the slogan appears over here. So that's kind of what I hope that you will do, even if it's just as simple as having some text in here to give your project the feeling that it exists outside of simply a little exercise in class. Now I want to show you one last example here, and you know that I've really harped big time on avoiding having a ground plane in your picture. And if you do have a ground plane in the picture, the bad part of having your subject connected to the ground plane. Now here is the best dog in the world, Charlie, right here. He's laying in the grass. And the problem is, you remember, we have postcards in space. We have only two planes here. We have the subject layer in a flat plane and the background layer in a flat plane. Now, it's a big problem for us because we don't have a ground plane. So let's see what happens when we animate the camera movement. And what you're going to see is Charlie seems to be detached from the ground. Okay, so that's a bad thing. Okay, we can't have something that's not attached to the ground. That is why it's important not to have your subject connected to the ground. And there's a couple other elements in here. If you're interested, you can play around. You could build your own 3D cube if you would like to. It's kind of a fun little project, but you're not required to do that. It's just something fun for you to do. All right, so let's get started with this project. I want you first to import your Photoshop file. So we're going to double click in the gray area here. And here it is, my PSD file that we created for last week's project. Going to go ahead and import that. And we get a dialog that asks us, do you want to import this as a composition? And the answer is yes. If yours says footage, change it, okay? Composition, retain layer sizes, either one of those is going to be fine in this instance. We're just going to say composition and click OK. So what you'll see in the project window is your composition and also a set of layers. This composition's no good to us. We're just going to delete it. We don't want it in there. Doesn't matter if it's in there, but it's not doing us any good. Instead, we want the layers for the project right here. Now we have to create our own composition. So we're going to go down here to the composition shortcut. Make sure it's set to HD TV 1080, 1920 by 1080. We're going to make it 5 seconds long, and we'll click OK. And now we're going to take, I've got too many layers here, and you will too because you're using your Photoshop file. We only need the two. We need the background layer and the Toucan layer. And so we're going to bring those in to the timeline. Drag them onto the timeline. Now, they're in the wrong order. They came in alphabetical order, B before T. So we need to drag that guy down below the Toucan. And there's the Toucan. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is to add a camera. Layer, new camera. Now, the idea is that you are trying to mimic the camera lens that you had whenever you shot the picture. I'll show you a neat little shortcut. If you shot your own picture, you can open it using Adobe Bridge. Adobe Bridge. Where's Adobe Bridge? There it is. Adobe Bridge right there. And you're going to come up with a dialog that shows you everything about that picture. All this stuff down here, this is called metadata, and it tells you everything about the shot that you took. This was shot at f13 at 1,000th of a second, and the focal length was 121 millimeters. Now, for my particular image, well, I stole this one, so I don't know. I don't have any of the metadata for this image. But there's a couple of things I want to do here. I want to set it to a one node camera, and you can name it if you want to. It's not really necessary. Okay, a one node camera. What's a one node camera? Well, a one node camera allows you to dolly, truck, and pedestal. In other words, we can move the camera left and right, up and down, and in and out. But we cannot pan the camera or tilt the camera. When you try to do this project with a two-node camera, it kind of gives the gag away. You start to see that these images are flat really quick. It looks weird. So here for the camera, we're just going to go ahead and set the size to 50 millimeters. We're going to click OK. And now I want you to turn on the 3D switch for both of your layers. Now, if you cannot see the switches, if you can't see this 3D switch right here, it looks like a little cube, I want you to go down and click on this little icon down here in the very lower left of the interface. That turns on and off the layer switches. And so there you go. There's your layer switch for 3D. So we've got our camera. Now we need to set up our views. We're going to change one view to two views, horizontal. And on the left side, click over here on the left side and set it, it's probably set by default to top. I want you to change it from top to custom view 1. So you should have two views and custom view 1 on the left side. So what this shows you way off in the distance here is the camera, and then you have the two layers which are right on top of each other. Okay, now on the right hand side, we're going to roll back so we can see some of the edges. And we are going to click on the background layer and click S for scale. And we are going to scale this background down until it just is outside of the boundaries of the comp. You don't want to make it too small because if you do, then you're going to see black around the edges. And if I see black around the edges in your show, I'm going to count off. So let's set that at, what do the instructions say? 68%. Okay. And that gives us just a little extra around the edges there. Now for the Toucan layer, we're going to click on that one. And I want you to type P for position and then hold Shift and type S for scale. And let's set scale to 25%. 25%. Make it real little bitty. And now we have to pull this toucan image forward in depth to fill the space. And the way we do that is with our third dimension here in position. Remember the X dimension, the first set of numbers is left and right or horizontal. And then here's vertical, up and down. And then finally, this one right here that's set to 0 is depth. And we are going to set the depth to negative 1715. But what I'd like for you to do is to drag this. And so if you hold Shift, it'll drag really fast. And you can see what the result is. The toucan is pushing out towards the camera. Negative 1715, and it's really hard to hit. So you can just type it in if you want. Negative 1715. There you go. Why a negative number? Well, because it's moving towards the camera. If it were moving away from the camera, it would be a positive number. And if you moved it far enough back, it would disappear because the background would actually be in front of it. So let's move to 4 seconds in the timeline, and we will twirl up the parameters for our 2 layers, and we'll click on camera and type P for position, and we're going to set a keyframe. And while you're here, let's easy ease this keyframe. So again, if you're on a PC, you press the F9 key. If you're on a Mac, you have to right click on the keyframe and go to Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. Now we'll go to the beginning of the timeline, and let's push the camera forward in space to about negative 1790. Again, if you hold Shift, it'll move a lot faster. And somewhere around in there, negative 1790. It's a really hard number to hit, and it doesn't really have to be exact. This is just to give you some numbers to hit. I'd really rather you kind of push these numbers around just to see how it works, how the camera moves. What are the rest of the numbers? 682 and 305. So X is 682. Good enough. And what was it? 305. 305. Let's just type it in. 305. And let's see what the camera movement looks like. Okay, so in this case, it starts over the toucan's shoulder and moves back into a full shot of the toucan. Now, is this the way I want your camera to move? It's just one way the camera can move. You may want to actually do this in reverse. So maybe we have, I'm just going to reverse the position of these 2 keyframes, and we'll see what the motion looks like. Okay, well, we push the toucan actually out of the shot here, which wouldn't be bad if that were, say, a transition into another shot. But we could actually, position the toucan properly so that we could see a decent shot of the toucan. It's your call. So let me go ahead and again reverse the position of these 2 keyframes. And you can move the camera, as I said, any way that you want to. I do recommend that you do only a linear move. Just go from point A to point B. Don't rove around and try to look at everything else before you actually get here. That's just keep your movement simple. Now, there's one last thing that will help you to add interest to this, and that is to use the speed graph. And that's that little icon right there, the speed graph. And if you go and click on that guy, you can come down to the bottom. Next to the eyeball here is a set of the different graphs that you can use. Make sure that speed graph is chosen. The others, there's nothing wrong with those. They're just a little bit more complicated for first time out. Now, what this shows you in the up and down axis, that is the speed of the motion. And left to right over here, this is just time. Okay, so what it's telling you here is this starts out at 0, ramps up to speed, levels out, and then starts to put on the brakes and stop. Now, we can adjust these things. We can have it start full speed, like so, and then go really, really slow. Or we could even accentuate that motion. We could pull that guy all the way out. So now we have this boom, it's really starting fast and quickly slowing to a very, very slow movement. So we get something that looks like that. I'm going to go ahead and undo a couple of times and show you what happens when you do them both. We'll just pull them both out. Now we have nothing going on, and all of the movement is happening in the middle of the clip. Let's see what happens. And so there's probably some good happy medium for you in there somewhere. You get to pick. I just want you to play with this. This is a very common technique now. You're going to see it all the time. Once you train your eye to see it in commercials and sports events or whatever, once you start to pick it out, you'll go, all right, well, I know what that is. They're manipulating the dynamics of the motion in After Effects or some other program. And that's it. You're done. From here, you're going to export the project just like you've been learning to do. You'll save, of course, and then you'll go File, Export, Add to Adobe Media Encoder Q, and continue on with the instructions as you have done before. Okay, good luck, have fun, let me know if you have questions.